Welcome to Native Yoga Toddcast. So happy you are here. My goal with this channel is to bring inspirational speakers to the mic in the field of yoga, massage, bodywork, and beyond. Follow us at Native Yoga and check us out at nativeyogacenter.com. All right, let's begin. Hello, and I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to Native Yoga Toddcast. My name is Todd McLaughlin. I have a very special guest today for episode number 200. Yeah! Her name is Sandhya Balakrishnan. Her Instagram handle is at the.yogini.project, and you can find her also on YouTube under the same name. And she is in Bangalore, India. She is a yoga teacher and really down to earth. And I can't wait for you to hear her perspective on yoga. It's just so honest and real. Oh my gosh, Sandhya, thank you so much. What a pleasure it was. I'm so inspired right now, and I can't wait for you to hear this episode. And for your support to hit episode number 200. It's been a little over 4 years now. I'm just excited to celebrate here with you. And Sandhya, let's begin. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to meet Sandhya Balakrishnan. Sandhya, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be a guest on the show. How are you feeling today?
Todd, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And as we were speaking earlier, this is episode number 200 for you. And congratulations on that. I feel really lucky to be a part of the podcast series that you're doing, and I'm happy to be number 200 for this episode.
Thank you so much, Sandhya.
I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
I'm doing really well, and I'm really glad that we were able to meet through Instagram. And it's really incredible how we're on two different sides of the planet, literally, with two very different time zones. And somehow the algorithm matched us, and we were able to come to this conversation today and share our thoughts about yoga, movement, and all things related to these disciplines.
Oh,
very
man.
happy to be here, Todd.
Oh, thank you. It is quite amazing that we can connect this way. I'm a fan of technology, and I agree with you. What an amazing chance to be able to meet people on the other side of the planet. This would never would have happened, well, gosh, not even that long ago, like what, 30 years, 20 years? Wouldn't have happened maybe. Yeah. Well, on that note, Sandhya, I'm so curious, how did you first get involved in yoga practice? You were born and raised in India, yes?
Yeah, that's right. So Todd, I have spent my entire life in India, but I have had the chance to visit a few countries outside of here, and I've had the chance to be exposed to multiple cultures outside of India. And those are experiences that I really value. But the experiences that really shaped me to the person I am today came from my upbringing in various parts of the country, mostly towards the western parts of the country. I've also lived in the northern part of the country for a bit. And currently I'm settled in a city called Bangalore, which is in southern India. And my first introduction to yoga was around the age of 10, if I remember correctly. So as a child, I was suffering from chronic asthma. I used to have several episodes in a year where I would be out of breath. I would be in a lot of pain and discomfort. And medical wisdom at that time, which was, say, 2.5 decades earlier, did not really warrant the use of inhalers as frequently for children. And I know this because asthma, bronchitis, and other respiratory issues, they typically tend to run in the families. And my daughter, she also has her fair share of issues with, bronchitis because it comes from the family.
Yes.
Now, until the age of 10, I went through several episodes a year, suffering and being extremely uncomfortable, not being able to play much, not being able to enjoy sports as much. Until my pediatrician once recommended to my parents that I should perhaps try yoga. And we were in a city called Pune at the time, which is in the western part of the country. And this is also the city where Shri BKS Iyengar has a huge institution. Of course, I didn't have the chance to study in that institution at that early an age, but there was a smaller studio that was run by a really wonderful lady who had learned under Sri Iyengar himself. And she was the one who first introduced me to some of the basics in terms of asana practice and a very brief introduction to pranayam as well. And there were two things that really struck me from my first exposure to yoga at the age of 10. The first one being that after every class, I would somehow end up feeling this profound sense of peace and calm, which I couldn't explain at the time. It was a very, very beautiful feeling of absolute clarity and peace. And it was wonderful as a 10-year-old to be able to feel something like that. Of course, I didn't have the words to articulate it back then. And the second feeling was a gradual improvement in my condition. In fact, over the years, so I ended up practicing with that studio only for about a year, and then we had to move cities and so on. But through that brief exposure to asana practice and some basics of pranayama practice, I found that actually my condition dramatically improved, and I went from having several episodes of asthma in a year to perhaps one in, say, 2 years. And those episodes were manageable. So I think in essence, what the practice led to was strengthening of my lungs, improvement of my cardiovascular endurance in a sense, and definitely the ability to be able to regulate my breathing better. So that was my very first exposure to yoga at a very early age.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, my daughter is 11 and she has asthma. And so it's really interesting to hear your perspective from that age and what that's like. I'm curious, do you have any bouts of it now, or is it something that was like childhood and you grew out of it?
I'm really going to say touch wood on this one because I can't honestly remember the last time I had an episode.
Very cool.
It's been a really long time. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's been a very, very long time.
Amazing. Are you able to teach your daughter any methods or techniques that you found is helping her currently?
I have taught her myself. In fact, she is very happy to sometimes come along when I'm conducting a yoga class in this very room. And she's able to do Surya Namaskars on her own.
Nice.
And I'm very happy that her school also has yoga as part of their curriculum. It's part of the academic, the syllabus that they have. And her condition has improved dramatically from when she was a child. And I'm expecting further improvement as she grows a little older. So she's 8 now, and I'm assuming by the time she's 11, 12-ish, there will be a little more improvement in the condition as she ages.
Nice. What types of yoga have you learned over the years? It sounds like you had exposure to Iyengar method. And you've traveled extensively, obviously around India, and you said also globally. What type of yoga practices have you been attracted to?
Well, that's a really interesting question because after my first exposure to yoga, around the age of 10. My second exposure came around the time I was 16, I think, 16 or 17 years old. And this was towards the end of what we in India refer to as class 12 or grade 12. And it's a sort of the last point before we enter college. So post grade 12 is when we then enter college for further education. And that examination is really critical because of the intensely competitive environment in the country. And, I was very keen to do well in that exam so that I would have brighter chances of going to a really, good college.
Yes.
And what ended up happening was I spent that entire year studying. sitting and studying, being very sedentary, not being very mindful about the food that I ate. And as a result, I ended up putting on a considerable amount of weight. And at that time, I was keen to explore yoga again to see if there would be any improvement in my current state with yoga. And I was exposed to a studio which was run by teachers who had learned from Kaivalya Dham. And Kaivalya Dham is another very, very well-known institution in the western part of the country. And their style is more hatha. So their style is more longer asana holds,
Yes. Yes.
go at your own pace. There's no vinyasa flow really, but it's more about exploring each asana on its own, go at your own pace, very long holds, followed by nice long shavasanas,
Yes. Yes.
a relatively more peaceful environment.
Yeah.
And that was the style I think that I got most drawn towards, because at that time, all I needed was a reconnection back to my own self and a reconnection back to mindful eating habits, mindful movement habits. And that practice enabled me to become really, really aware of all of the habits that I needed to change in terms of my own nutrition and in terms of movement. And I say this in fact, there is some content I've put out on Instagram on this very topic, but I will also mention this right here.
Please.
Over the last 20, 25 years, I have pretty much eaten in the same way, or rather, the amount of food that I have consumed on a daily basis has pretty much remained the same. And my weight has, rarely fluctuated over 2 or 3 kilos plus minus, barring the phase where I was pregnant with my daughter. And even then, I had put on only the requisite amount of weight. So my weight was always in check because of these mindful eating habits that I was able to develop at that young an age through exposure to the Hatha style of yoga. And my blood markers are great. I keep getting my health checkups done once every year, and my blood markers come out great. And as a woman, another great indicator of overall health is the regularity of our cycles. And my cycles have been more reliable than any clock or calendar in the house. So my cycles have always been very reliable. And I credit all of this to the principles of Hatha Yoga. And it's not so much the asana practice that's important. It's the practice of, it's literally the essence of the word yog. Yog, as we all know, comes from the Sanskrit root word yuj, which means union. And this is not so much union with the divine self. The divine self comes much later, whether there is a divine power up there or not. We're all exploring. I don't think any of us has clear answers on that yet.
Yes.
But at least to be able to connect deeply with your own self, to be able to listen to your body's signals, to eat only when you're hungry, to stop when you're full, to eat what works best for your body. I think that is one of the biggest learnings that I've had from my exposure to Hatha Yoga back then. And Hatha is something that I always treat as the foundation of everything that I do. Not just from a student perspective, but also from a teacher's perspective. So it's literally at the foundation of whatever I do. And in today's world, I think a lot of people do face similar issues where they are not able to understand how to listen to their own bodies, how to honor their own needs, both from a physical and a mental perspective. And my endeavor as a teacher is to try and help them reach a point where they're able to take a step back and listen to what their body is telling them or what their mind is telling them, slow down a little bit, and then make whatever changes they need to so as to achieve a balanced state in life. So I hope that answers your question.
That
Slightly
does.
Longish answer, but I hope
Please, I like the long answers. Thank you, Sandhya. That's really amazing. I think you're right that the relationship to food and our ability to actually listen to the body seems like a really important part. Do you feel like there's a slight overemphasis on the asana component, or do you think that the overemphasis on the asana eventually will lead one to having this sort of self-regulation and or insight to learn that? Do you feel like eventually that would come?
This is by far one of the most interesting things that I like to talk about in yoga.
Yeah.
Um, you open your phone and you look at any social media app today, um, you'll most likely be bombarded with images of people performing very complex postures with their bodies and claiming it to be yoga, and somehow implying that that is the essence of yoga, or that is what yoga is. Um, and then you'll find a lot of people arguing and debating about which style of asana practice is better. There will be some folks who lean more towards one style of practice, and then they tend to develop a sense of superiority or supremacy about that practice. They tend to develop a sense of attachment towards that practice, which then leads them to discredit what others are doing, which sometimes leads them to behave in ways that makes other folks feel like they're not included, or that they're not enough.
Well said.
And all of this. So, for example, folks who have a certain type of anatomy, or a certain type of history in say dance or gymnastics or athletics, are naturally able to perform some of the yoga asanas much better than others. But then that really leaves out the majority of the people out there who may not have had the exposure to, say, dance or gymnastics or athletics, or who may not be naturally blessed with hypermobile joints or naturally flexible spines. And when people like that look at images of folks doing asana and then calling it yoga, it's a very limiting view of yoga, in my opinion. There's so much more to yoga than the asana practice. In fact, asana, and I'm sure you know this from your own rich experience of teaching and learning, right? When we speak of the 8 limbs of yoga, the first 2 are the ones that people have sort of stopped talking about, the Yama and the Niyama.
Yeah, good point.
Right?
They've stopped talking about it. It's a good point.
They've stopped talking about it. There is no
There's no
mention
talk
of
about it.
Yama and Niyama,
Yeah,
right?
good point.
And it's really unfortunate. They quickly jump on to Asana, which is limb number 3. It's not even 1 or 2, it's limb number 3.
Yeah.
And then there's more after that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And currently, Asana is glorified as the single solution to all problems in life. But take a moment, let's consider the Yama and the Niyama, right? So you have one of the Yamas as aparigraha, or non-hoarding. I hope I'm remembering it right. So non-hoarding, right? Non-accumulation, non-excess accumulation of possessions. Okay? But look around you and see what's happening. People are excessively accumulating things, objects.
A great point.
They're excessively accumulating clothes, shoes, bags, jewelry. Excessive consumption of content on OTT media, on social media. Excessive consumption of food in general, and excessive consumption of junk food in general, right?
Great.
And
yes.
And here there are certain schools of yoga that are trying to solve these problems with a limited asana practice. Do you really think asana is the solution to solving a problem that actually exists somewhere else? How do you stop yourself? How do you even recognize that you're actually hoarding things? Okay, that's one example. Another example is,
That's a good one. I love that. I love that. I got to stop you for 1 second because every time I've heard of a
yeah,
parigraha in relation to like non-hoarding, non-greed, or
yeah,
accumulation, I like that you've made the connection point to accumulation of even consumption of social media, and then even
yeah,
making the connection with food too, because often like we think like, oh, I should, if I'm not going to be greedy and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to try to get the new car or the bigger house or the whatever else. But making that extra jump over toward accumulation in relation to every little bit of energy that comes in, whether it's food or visual or audio or what
yeah,
our senses are. So that's really cool, Sandhya. But I don't want to interrupt you. But
yeah.
please keep going. That's great.
No, I'm glad you like this way of thinking, because this is exactly how I think about yoga, right? And I'll just take one other example from the Yama and Niyama. There's something known as shauch, or cleanliness. Okay.
Yes.
Now, the traditional interpretation of cleanliness is cleanliness of the surroundings. Um, but you could extend it to mean cleanliness of your own body, what you put inside. Okay. So if you put junk inside, if you're going to put unclean stuff into your body time and time again, it kind of violates the the principle of shauch, or cleanliness, correct?
Yes.
And these are things which cannot be solved with asana alone. Now, but having said that, asana is a great introduction to the practice. It's a great introduction to yoga or a yogic way of living. But what we need are teachers who are able to extend yoga beyond asanas. What we need are teachers who are able to actually bring these perspectives to their students.
Yes.
uh, because otherwise there's a lot of disconnect. And even when we speak of asanas, there's a certain belief that certain asanas are advanced or certain asanas are beginner asanas. uh, Let me give you a few you know uh,
Please.
examples here.
Please.
So today in one of my classes in the morning, um, I was helping my students do the Shirashasana, or the headstand, right? It's a fairly complicated, very layered posture to achieve, with its own inherent set of risks. And it's also very difficult to help people do it in an online environment in a very inclusive way. But when I approached it, I was very clear in telling my students that, you know what, there's a general belief that this is supposed to be the quote unquote king of asanas, but that is, at the risk of sounding arrogant, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. Why would you call a certain posture as the king of asanas and give it that, put it up on a pedestal like that?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. If
Great point,
a student
Sandhya.
of mine is unable to do the headstand, but she's able to be a kind and compassionate and a generous person in her day-to-day life, if she's able to perform her dharma with the utmost sincerity, if she's able to do her, if she's able to be mindful of her surroundings, mindful of people around her, and just because she's not able to perform the Shirshasana, does that make her a bad yogi? I
Mm-mm.
mean,
Mm-mm.
of course not.
No.
So I told them very clearly that there are all these names that are given to asanas. There are all these labels that are given to asanas, which are unfortunate, and they're very limiting and they're ridiculous. You
Agreed.
cannot call a certain posture as the king of asanas, because if someone's not able to do it, then that person ends up feeling inadequate, insecure, um, non-validated. And is that what you want people to feel at the end of a yoga class? Absolutely not. I definitely don't want my
Mm-mm.
students feeling inadequate about their capability of performing a certain physical posture. You know,
Great
I want
point.
them to feel like they tried. I want, and the word hatha itself means effort. Hatha means effort. I want them to feel like they put in the best efforts that they could and that they gave it their best shot during that class. And hopefully, in the next class or whenever we do it next, they'll be able to understand it better, maybe get better at it, maybe not get better at it. It's okay. All that matters is effort.
Yes. Yes.
And when we speak of asana, also the stuff that we see on social media, let's take another example of Yoga Nidrasana, the leg behind the head posture. I fail to understand how in today's world where so many people are stuck in sedentary jobs where they're sitting on their chairs for more than 10, 12 hours a day. And these are people who cannot perform a regular, simple, deep squat. They can't squat down.
Yes.
Their hips are not strong enough. Their legs are not strong enough. The knee joints are not capable enough of holding a deep squat position. And then you're showing them, you're bombarding them with images of these people with dance backgrounds, gymnastics backgrounds, and people coming from certain lineages of schools and effortlessly doing the Yoga Nidrasana and implying that it's something to be achieved. I'm sorry, Yoga Nidrasana has no functional benefit in day-to-day life. Let me be very honest about it. There's no functional benefit of the Yoga Nidrasana in day-to-day life.
Yes.
But there is a lot of functional benefit of a simple malasana or a deep squat. So when people are entering yoga, do you want them to enter thinking that, oh my God, someday I want to be able to do the Yoga Nidrasana, and perhaps they might never be able to do the Yoga Nidrasana, and then they end up feeling really inadequate at the end of their lives? I'm sorry, that is not the way I look at asana practice. So therefore, the long answer to your question is asana practice is very limiting. We need to be speaking more about the yamas, the niyamas, and the other limbs that follow asana. So your pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses, dharana, dhyana. I think we are talking very less of this and a lot about asana without looking at, ethics and social conduct, ahimsa, asteya, even the whole principle of ahimsa or non-violence is not just about not killing, things or living beings. It doesn't relate to killing really. It relates to violence of any form. And when you are forcing your body to do a Shirashasana or a Yoga Nidrasana at a time when you are not physically or emotionally capable of doing it, you're subjecting yourself to violence. And there's no need to do it. The founding principles never really spoke about this kind of violence. It's always thiram sukham asanam, right? In order to enter a meditative state, any posture is fine, wherever you're sitting in a stable and a happy state. Patanjali said this, right? Sthiram sukham asanam. Asanam is any posture where I could be sitting right here on this chair and I'm comfortable and I'm able to close my eyes, I'm able to concentrate on a certain point and I'm able to achieve a brief but blissful state. And I may not be in Padmasana, but that's okay.
Yes. Yes.
So that's my view on asana.
I'm so thankful that you're bringing this to the forefront, because I think it's really important today to hear this message, Sandhya, because there's so much going on, and just in relation to the yoga world, it is like we're seeing this really come to light now, especially as I'm getting older, and the more I'm speaking with practitioners that have been with yoga for 20, 30, 40 years, and starting to understand that it's not just about the body and all these positions, and even looking at like, well, I've been doing yoga nidrasana for 20 years and now I can't walk or my back is messed up, right? And you kind of look back and go, wow, here all this time I just thought that if I was doing yoga, everything would just work out just perfectly. I wasn't really listening to my body at the time. It hurt like crazy, but I just thought that if I kept doing it, this is what I was supposed to be doing. And there's a little bit of a disconnect. There's not that real deep connection like what you're speaking of. So I think this is a really important conversation to have.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you're bringing it to this point. And can I ask you a little then, because in relation to the fourth Yama, Brahmacharya, can you explain a little bit from your
Yeah.
perspective from, the cultural
Yeah.
aspect in India? And because a lot of times I feel like Westerners have a hard time grappling with this one. And I know from
Yeah.
what I understand, if we break the words down, like Brahma referencing the god or deity of this is creation, correct?
Creation.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
acharya is like a chariot or a vehicle. So maybe the
Yeah.
vehicle of Brahma. And then from what I understand in relation to, like, a lot of times in the West, we'll hear celibacy, and then, and I understand, like, in Indian culture, there's, or please correct me, because I want to understand
Yeah.
Indian
Yeah.
culture,
Sure.
is that, like, obviously from ages 0 to 13, or from the time that we are married, or perhaps becoming a householder or a parent, we should be celibate. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think this is a perfect thing in relation to people where they, are wondering, like, how should we have conduct with children and adults? Well, yeah, it's very clear. You, as a child, that's
Yeah.
special, and you don't
Yeah.
violate that, right? So I guess
Yeah.
I'd just love to hear your take on how that has evolved for you in your life and your understanding of it, especially being a mom too.
Okay, great. That's a really interesting question, and I'll try and give my perspective on it.
Please.
So, Brahmacharya means abstinence or celibacy, okay? But both terms, if viewed independently, have different degrees of control. So, abstinence is a little more control, celibacy is a complete stop to sexual activities, at the inappropriate time. Now, in the Indian tradition, there are certain aspects of spirituality that are talked about in connection to preservation of sexual energy. All right. So it is believed in certain sections of the Indian culture that if you abstain from sexual activity for long enough, you will end up preserving your sexual energy, which will then perhaps help you to attain greater heights of spirituality much faster. So there is this certain belief that exists in certain sections of the society. But having said that, not all of us need to do it. Not all of us have the in fact, I would say not all of us are destined for that spiritual path. Not all of us are destined to reach spirituality or, the higher forms of peace, etc., from that path. So not all of us are meant to do it that way. For most of us, we are meant to go through life. We're meant to go through the motions of life, and we are meant to perform our duties in the marital environment. We are meant to perform our duties in the parental environment. And that's where Brahmacharya takes a very unique role. So essentially, it means that, you understand sexuality well in your teenage years, and you understand how to regulate your urges and how to be mindful about engaging in sexual activity in your youth before you get married. You be very mindful and respectful about it. But when you do enter the institution of marriage, you must be very, 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 very aware of your role as a spouse and of your role as a parent eventually, if you choose to become a parent. And there, your abstinence will only be in relation to being faithful to your partner, to not exploring your sexuality outside of the realm of the marital institution that you have entered. And I think there's merit in understanding celibacy, understanding abstinence like this, because, for a household to function peacefully and for a household to thrive, there has to be a great degree of mutual respect between both partners, correct?
Correct.
And a lot of that respect also has to do in terms of, the kind of sexual activities or the sexual urges that the partners may experience from time to time. And often there might be an imbalance in the frequency or the intensity of urges of the partners. But as long as the partners have respect for each other and they are able to stay committed only to each other and to not explore these urges outside of the institution of marriage, it leads to a stable family, a peaceful environment, and a great place for children to grow up and thrive with the right values in place. So that's the way I look at Brahmacharya.
Yeah. Well said, Sandhya.
And absolute celibacy, I think, the people who choose to become monks or priests are expected to take on vows of celibacy because they've chosen a certain very rigorous path of spiritual enlightenment. And I think those people have a far more strict set of regulations to follow. But for the rest of us, I think we're all still yogis if we're able to be, if we're able to abstain within the realms and the limitations of the institution of marriage that we enter.
Yeah.
Should we choose to enter the institution of marriage? So that's Brahmacharya for me.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Thank you for, because I feel like it's a subject that sometimes people get a little squeamish about, but I feel like if we just address and talk about it, in an adult-like fashion, it makes a lot of sense. And, and family values are so important. Good, strong family values and holding the family together like this. Oh my gosh, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
You are, from what I understand from following you, you had a career in, like a very demanding career path, and then you became or chose to become a yoga teacher. Can you speak a little bit about your journey from the corporate environment to the current role that you play as a professional yoga teacher?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I really hope that you're enjoying this episode, and I just wanted to take a moment to announce a course that I'm really excited to release. It's a free course, and it's called 8 in 8, Learn 8-Limb Yoga in 8 Days. My goal is to help coach you along in the Ashtanga yoga practice in a way where we take just the sun salutations, the fundamental asanas, and the final breathing poses, break it down with some philosophy videos as well, explaining the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga in a very easy to use, friendly course that is totally free. Click the link below, check it out. Let me know what you think. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Sure. I think that's an interesting question because I do get a lot of people around me asking me about how and why I made the switch. And I'll try and answer both aspects of it. So while I was growing up, I was led to believe that the only way to be financially independent was to study really well and get a great job in a reputed corporate organization. And this is the belief system that a lot of my friends and peers and contemporaries also grew up with, because we all belonged to a generation where we were being brought up in an environment where there was extreme competition, resources were scarce, and we were told that the only way to be financially secure and to build a good financial foundation for your future generation was to do this. And so a lot of us ended up doing this. A lot of us ended up studying really well, working really hard. And honestly, I'm very grateful that I grew up like this, because a strong academic foundation is timeless. There's nothing that beats a strong academic foundation. The ability to think critically, the ability to explore different subjects in school and college. So I think my parents did a fantastic job in raising me in a way to be academically sound, academically curious. And I took on a corporate job at a very early age, right out of college. And I worked for a total of 15 years across various organizations, and these were all really, really great names in the world of consumer products, retail, media, and e-commerce. And these are really great organizations that are doing some really good work in their respective fields. And I'm really, really grateful because for those 15 years, I developed skill sets which I otherwise never would have, and specifically skill sets pertaining to the sales and marketing arenas, because I now realize as a yoga professional, as a teacher and as an entrepreneur trying to build a name in this field, that one does need to have a little bit of background in sales and marketing to be able to navigate this new
Yes.
age world of yoga, right? So
Yes.
I'm very grateful that for those 15 years, I ended up developing the skill sets in sales and the skill sets in marketing. And I made the switch. How? Because, or rather, I made the switch. Why? Because I was feeling like my jobs lacked a sense of deeper meaning and purpose. While it was, great that they exposed me to all of these new skill sets, they granted me the privilege of developing some really good professional networks, and I'm really, really grateful to be able to have some very, very senior people in my professional network even today who I can just pick up the phone on and ask for help if I need to. I'm very, very privileged to be in that position. But at the end of the day, I felt like I needed to be doing something more meaningful and tangible to people around me. And that was the why behind the switch that I made. And now the how is more important.
Yeah.
A lot of people, in my circles and in general conversation, seem to be very unhappy with their jobs. There's a general sense of discontentment with corporate jobs. Okay, I'm not sure if this is your experience, but at least from
Yes.
my own experience, you've come across people who are generally discontented with. Yeah.
We hear, yeah, there's,
All of
yes, corporate America, corporate work, corporate world is constantly we're hearing that. That's a huge subject. Absolutely. I
That's a
think,
huge subject.
yeah, I feel like there's probably a few people. I mean, I meet a few people that are in corporate life that really love it. Like they're at the top of their game
Yeah.
and they're engaged and they absolutely love it. But I would say a much larger proportion of people I hear and I speak with are more just like, I'm just going through the motions. I'm just showing up every day, and a lot of like there's a lot of job insecurity in the corporate world from what I'm gathering from everybody. Like it seemed initially like this was the one path, the golden path. I'm just going to become a corporate pro, and now there's a lot of shakedown going on from what I understand speaking with folks. So I hear, this is not just I think this is a global element.
The global thing.
Yeah.
So when you have a large chunk of people who are generally unhappy with the work that they're doing, the first instinct is for them to quit and do something else. So they'll either jump ship from one organization to another, or they will quit and try to figure out something in the non-corporate environment. And in both instances, the chances of success are limited. So if you don't have a plan in place, if you don't know why you're quitting your corporate job, and if you don't have a 6-month horizon or a 1-year horizon in place, it gets really hard. And then you're forced to jump back to a job that you really don't like to do. Now, in my case, I knew I had to move on, but I didn't have a plan in place for a very long time. So for several years, I went to work. I did my job the best I could, and I made sure I, gave my 100% to whatever was asked of me. And until I found my reason for quitting, I didn't quit. I hung on. And I tried to make the best of the situation that I had on hand, because it's work at the end of the day. It's karma, right? And if you've been asked to do a certain job, you might as well just go and do it the best you can, right? And then once you've logged off from work, then you can spend your time at home thinking about what it is that you would like to do if it was not this job. And so I
Yes.
spent several years doing that. And finally, in 2020, just before the pandemic hit us, I did my teacher's training course. And I did that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I just wanted to give you a heads up that we have an online program called nativeyogaonline.com, and there's a code, all caps, first month free. We upload our daily classes that we teach here at Native Yoga Center, making it accessible for you no matter where you are in the world at any time of the day and or night that you want to practice. We're here for you. All right. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let's get back into it.
With no clear agenda in mind. I just did it because I thought it would be a great certification to have. And to be very honest, I was approaching it as a CV point item, something I can speak about in interviews, future job interviews. But when I actually did the TTC is when I realized that this was something that was far bigger than what it seemed at that point. It seemed so strong to me. I felt like I had to do something in that space. But even after that, I didn't quit my job. I continued working for another 18 to 20 months after my TTC. And during that time, I was trying very hard to assess my financial situation, to assess whether we would be good to go, with a certain disparity of incomes in the family, and whether we would be good with the sudden career switch and the new demands of my work. So my husband and I had several conversations about it. I had several conversations with my friends about it. I ran multiple spreadsheets on my own. I made sure that I was financially sound. I made sure that I wouldn't be left with nothing to hold on to.
Yes.
And it's only then that I communicated to the organization that, I'd really like to move on because I feel like this is something I need to do. But if I had to go back in time and revisit that decision, would I make a different decision?
Ooh.
Absolutely not.
Yay.
I'm very glad I did what I did.
Yes.
I'm very glad I did.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Sandhya. Very cool. Very cool. And that was going to be my next question. So thank you for just jumping right to it. Because after you have a little bit of time after your crossover, so this was 15 years ago that you embarked on this journey?
No. So I quit my job 3 years ago. So I quit my job
I'm so
in
sorry.
July of 2021.
You said 2020. And so I'm sorry, I went back. I thought I heard you say 15.
Yeah.
Understood. So.
And I worked for 15 years. So I've been working since
got it.
2006 until 2021. Yeah.
So are you teaching primarily on Zoom or a combo? I saw some of your Instagram is showing that you're conducting Zoom classes, and then I noticed that you were teaching in a studio. What a really cool photo. I saw students looked like they were going for Uplitihi. They had Padmasana and maybe pushing down to try to lift up. And you're you kind of had that joy of a yoga teacher, a happy moment of how cool to be here with these folks and seeing them work so hard. And wow, what a very rewarding experience. So then what I can also gather though too is that I'm seeing, and I like the fact that you're coaching people in the reality of this and not just kind of doing a Dvipada Shirshas, a leg behind the head corporate shift persona of hey, look at me, you guys. I was a corporate person. I just switched over to yoga and it's so much better and easier and everything's great. You're being very honest and real and actually saying to people, whoa. If this is something you're serious about, you have to really take yoga seriously. And there's got to be a dedicated commitment before just jumping ship from corporate over to the dream. We have a dream and then we realize, the dream is a little more involving than I had planned for. So I love hearing about your ability to kind of really strategize. I also agree and appreciate like you're utilizing the skills you were able to learn through your corporate life, and now that is playing a big part in your success as a
Yeah.
independent yoga teacher profession. So
Yeah.
that's super inspirational. Can you give another little, I know we're getting close
Thank
to
you.
I know we scheduled
Yeah.
an hour and I'm already like, oh my gosh, I have so many questions for you. How am I going to squeeze them all? But I know we don't have to hurry, and we could potentially do
I'm sorry if my answers were really
no,
long, but I really
no, are
enjoyed
you kidding?
the
These are
questions, and
amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Sandhya. So, I mean, then I guess if you had to pick one um, nugget or tidbit or takeaway for advice for those of us that are either thinking about doing what you did, making the jump, or those of us that are new in the game and going, how in the world am I going to pull this off? Any little tidbit of advice?
Well, I'm
Yeah.
fairly new to the field myself, and
Mhm.
I don't want to sound, like I know too much, but
Understood.
I'll
I
share
appreciate that.
whatever little I learned over the last
Yeah.
3 years or so.
Yeah.
Um, for those of us who are thinking of making the switch from corporate to yoga in particular, I think you have to be very, very strongly called to it. And that experience is unmatched. So unless you feel a very strong calling to it, something that it doesn't seem forced, it's a natural calling. Until that comes, I would say not the best idea to come to yoga, simply because the demands of this profession are huge. So it's a very energy intensive profession. On a day-to-day basis, when we are teaching our students, there's a massive energy exchange that happens, right? And the more invested you are in your students' growth and in their health and fitness, the more energy you're putting into the job. And you'll realize that you may sometimes not have adequate time for your own health goals, your fitness, and there's a lot of other things you will have to adjust in your day-to-day life. Also, it takes time and patience to build a community of students that understand your style of teaching, that resonate with you as a person. And you need to be very, very mature when you're dealing with different kinds of people from different backgrounds. You need to have an inherent sense of being open to meeting new people, whether it's in a digital environment like Zoom or whether it's in person. And if you're somebody who's not very comfortable with interacting with people, then this profession becomes very difficult because people are at the core of it. And if you're in it to make a difference to people's lives, you have to be open to meeting people from all kinds of backgrounds, with all kinds of medical histories, personal histories, um, So
Yes. Yes.
you need to be prepared for all of that. Uh, it's not a gig where you can sit behind a computer and do some coding or make a few presentations and that's the end of it. It's a very hands-on job. It's a very hands-on job, and by hands-on, I obviously don't mean hands-on in terms of assists. I mean hands-on in terms of you've got to really get into the nitty-gritty of teaching. You've got to understand how to deal with people, how to understand everyone's unique anatomy, how to structure a class in a way that everyone feels inclusive. You need to understand your niche. So over the last 3 years, I've kind of understood that my niche leans towards strength and endurance more than a slower yin-paced class. I've realized that my niche lies in strength and endurance, and I try and make my classes very relevant and engaging. So all of this requires a certain level of preparedness. So if you're not prepared to do all of this, and of course, if you're not prepared for the wild fluctuations in revenue that can happen from month to month, because this is not a gig that's going to guarantee a fixed revenue every month. Your revenue will go up and down depending on, the number of students you're serving, the kind of studio that you're working with, if at all, or if you're freelancing, the nature of your freelancing gigs. So if you're prepared for all of that, then make the switch. Otherwise,
Yeah.
hang on to your job, do your job the best you can, and
Yes.
then wait
Yeah.
when the day comes. And
Yes.
for those of us starting out new, I think similar advice would hold true. But the one thing I would really want to tell the new folks to yoga is just teach as much as you can.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
teach,
Yeah.
There is so much you can learn from teaching that books will not tell you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You can read all the books you want, you can watch all the YouTube videos you want, but nothing replicates the experience of teaching.
Yes.
Believe me, I've learned so much about, say, for instance, doing a simple a cat cow posture in the class, a cat cow
Yes.
demonstration.
Yeah.
I've had several instances where people have have been unable to do it because of certain anatomical limitations, people of different age groups, people of different medical conditions, and I've had to modify on the spot for people. Okay, and that learning you will not get from books, and you may perhaps not even get from your own teachers.
Great
It's
point.
just something you have to go out there and do. If you want to teach, if you want to become a teacher, you have to teach as much as you can. That's the only thing I would tell people who are starting out in this field new. That just go ahead and teach, no matter what the teaching gig is, even if there is only one person in the class. Make those 60 minutes or 90 minutes count for that one person.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. No, never ever think about the number of people in a class. I know it feels a little upsetting when the room is large, but you have only one student to teach. I know it can be upsetting at times, especially for the newcomers. But think about it this way: that one person has walked into that space or has come into your Zoom class, keeping aside all of his or her other commitments. That person's chosen to dedicate those 60 minutes to you. So it's your responsibility to make sure that that person has the best 16 minutes and that person walks out feeling amazing after 60 minutes. I mean, even if you put that person through a vigorous, like a vinyasa sequence or a power sequence,
Yes.
it doesn't matter. At the end of the 60 minutes, the person should feel like, you know what, the 60 or 90 minutes was worth it. So that's your responsibility as a teacher, is what I would say.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Sandhya. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. I know it's so classic, like you said, with the large group versus the one. And even the element of, say, the cat cow, I think personally why I love teaching so much is like you just think like, this is going to be really easy. I'm just going to show somebody how to do a cat cow, and you look over and they're not able to do it. And then there's maybe that first little bit of like, well, wait, how come they can't do it? But then you actually, well, how can I figure out a way to get them to connect to actually be able to do what I'm saying? And then can I see the nuances of maybe if they can't really move their spine, but I can just try to get them to lift their head a little bit and then redirect what words I'm using to try to convey that is so much fun. It is so much fun. I mean, it really is. It is so enjoyable. And I mean, those little sparks that happen in that moment, I mean, that's why like I'll sometimes look at my schedule, it'll be busy and I'll go, oh boy, this is going to be a big day. But soon as I start in the morning, and then it goes by so fast because like you're interacting with people, it is so much fun.
Yeah.
And I really like that you're bringing, I love everything. I really, thank you so much, Sandhya. I love your perspective. You're doing an incredible job and really well thought out. I have to really also, I want to compliment your English is amazing. I love listening to you. You have a very, you sound great. How many languages do you speak? Because that's one thing I love about India is I'm so fascinated when I've been in India, the amount of languages, the people I meet and the amount of languages that people engage with is to me baffling. And I just love that aspect of your country and culture. How many other languages?
I can speak a total of 4 languages.
Wow.
Hindi,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Tamil, and Marathi.
Wow.
So
It's
I
so
can
impressive. All right.
figure my way out in the southern part of the country, the western part, most of the north and the eastern parts. So
Incredible.
I'm good to go in most parts of the country because of the languages that I speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, another thing I know we're really close on our time here. We're coming really close to our hour. I guess instead of taking you down a
Yeah.
whole nother track, let's move in the direction of concluding our conversation.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I
Yeah.
ask you another question, it's gonna keep going for a 2-hour podcast, which
Yeah,
I
I'm so
want to
sorry.
do.
My answers have been long-winded.
No,
I'm so
don't
sorry.
apologize, Sandhya. It's perfect. It's so great. You know, I guess a topic of conversation that here I just said I wasn't going to do this, but I have to. A topic of conversation here is I guess I don't know that a lot of people here in the West really honor and acknowledge the birthplace of yoga, and so I have a lot of respect for the lineage and like the amount of years that we like. I sometimes always think to myself like, how in the world am I involved in yoga? And then I have this appreciation for this tradition that's at least going back 5,000 years, very likely, but quite possibly even much longer than that. And here somehow today, like how did that continue all the way along? And then people sometimes come here and say, oh, yoga is going out of fashion. Now it's Pilates. Now it's HIIT classes or this or that. And I always think to myself, yoga is never going to go away, because if yoga is here now and it lasted this long, it's got such a solid bedrock that no matter what weather comes, no matter what difficult situations we face, pandemics, wars, yoga is going to continue to endure. I really believe this. Can you speak though, and maybe in closing, just share your own personal like appreciation for this history?
Well, you're right. Yoga is never going to quote unquote go out of fashion, but it depends on how you look at yoga. Okay. And like I mentioned in the earlier parts of the conversation, as long as the perspective about yoga is, kept to more than asanas, as long as we're able to approach yoga as a way of life, it's never going to go out of fashion. Because the way people perceive yoga today, they only perceive it in the light of asanas. And like I mentioned, asanas are very limiting. They're just a drop in the ocean. And it's a complex world, and there's always room to, and there's always a risk of making people feel excluded because they're not able to do asanas. And I suspect that the popularity of other forms of physical exercise is also because a lot of people started to feel excluded because they were not able to perform some of these complex postures, with very questionable functional benefits, if you ask me. And so I feel like a lot of them did want to move their bodies, did want to feel like there was scope to explore the limits of their physical capabilities, but they felt like yoga was perhaps very hard for them to reach. So they had to perhaps go or invent or devise other forms of movement, which borrowed from yoga a little bit, borrowed from the gym world a little bit, from other disciplines a little bit. And it's okay as long as people find joy in movement, as long as people find joy in doing what they're doing, the foundation then always goes back to yoga. And I'll close with a very interesting perspective on this, okay? It might seem controversial, but here's what it is. Now, I enjoy weightlifting quite a lot, okay? I discovered weightlifting about 2 years ago, and I had a bunch of great coaches who taught me how to lift weights correctly and safely without putting myself at any risk of injury. And I have grown to fall in love with it. All right. And does that make me a bad yogi? I doubt it. Why? Because let's take the example of a deadlift, a movement where you've loaded some pretty heavy weights onto a barbell and you've got to execute a movement where you're lifting that barbell up with some pretty heavy weights on both sides. Now, when I execute that movement, I am completely aware of each and every part of my body. I am completely in focus. I can't hear anything around me. I can't see anything around me. I am in a state of absolute concentration when I am executing that movement. So in a sense, I'm in a state of perfect dhyana when I'm in that movement, right? When I'm executing it. And I'm in complete connection with my body. So yoga, I'm in complete yoga with my body. I'm in complete union with my muscles, my form, my technique. Everything is on point. It's all coming together. And then when I do execute that lift, and it happens well for me, okay, I end up feeling a brief moment of joy, okay, which is almost meditative of sorts. And then I release the barbell or I drop it on the floor. So isn't that a way of approaching movement, but from a yogic lens? It's a way of approaching anything and everything that you do in day-to-day life, keeping the principles of yoga intact. And as long as you're able to do that, yoga will never go out of fashion. It is not just about the asanas.
Yes.
It is not just about the belts and the blocks and the leggings and the sports. No, it is.
Yes.
Those things will come and go, and it's important. You've got to commercialize certain aspects of things because it benefits a lot of people. But at the core of it, if you look at yoga as a way to connect with yourself, to truly understand your true nature, to become aware of who you are, what your shortcomings are, what your strengths are, how do you self-regulate, okay? How do you approach moments of good, moments of bad? How are you able to maintain calmness in the face of chaos? How are you able to maintain a sense of balance in your life? As long as you approach every single thing you do in life with this lens is yoga.
Yes.
And
Well
I'd
said.
like to sort of close with that.
Thank you so much, Sandhya. I love it. Great job. I really appreciate your insights, and I'm so thankful for you to share your love and passion for yoga with us. I think it's inspirational, motivational, from the realm of being able to make a living as a yoga teacher, as well as like really falling in love with yoga, and the passion for sharing it with others is really inspirational. So this has been a true treat, and thank you for joining me from the other side of the world. I keep having this thought, like I'm said, like over here in the West and over there in India, I feel like maybe the East and the West, eventually it's not going to really exist anymore. Like we're all going to be kind of one. It's going to it's combining. We're connecting and combining, and it's like, so I'm glad we're in that part of that phase, this phase of like the evolution of humanity.
Yeah, I know. And I'm very glad that you're aware of some of the deeper aspects about our culture and traditions. I'm very glad that you're able to say some of the Sanskrit names of asanas so well. And it's very humbling to see that, our culture and tradition is getting the kind of respect and love that it deserves from across the world. And, I would be very happy to meet you if you're in India anytime soon. I would be very happy to, show you around. I would be happy to introduce you to some of the amazing food that we have, the amazing music that we have, all of that. So next time you're in India, do let me know. I'd be very happy to.
That's so kind of you. Thank you, Sandhya. I love India. I have been to Bangalore. And last time we went to India, my wife and my son, we went to Goa and spent a month. And but I would love to come back to Bangalore or South India and have a tour guide who and take us to the best places to eat.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh,
hit me up, let me know.
And have a translator who can explain to me everything that's going on. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, what a treat. Thank you, Sandhya. I can't wait to come visit you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd, for this lovely conversation. I really enjoyed the time spent here. I wish we had time to speak more. And, I'm sharing my perspectives as someone who's just entered the field, and I'm sure my perspectives will change over a period of time. But as long as the foundation is clear and the reason for existence is clear, I think it's all good to go. But I'm really, really glad you reached out to me. I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Have a great day ahead.
You
See
too.
Yeah.
Native Yoga Toddcast is produced by myself. The theme music is dreamed up by Bryce Allen. If you like this show, let me know. If there's room for improvement, I want to hear that too. We are curious to know what you think and what you want more of, what I can improve. And if you have ideas for future guests or topics, please send us your thoughts to info@Native Yoga Center. You can find us at nativeyogacenter.com. And hey, if you did like this episode, share it with your friends, rate it and review, and join us next time.